Welcome to the Sports Ethicist Show, coming to you from the basement of Burpee on the campus of Rockford College in Sportstown, USA, Rockford, Illinois. I am Sean Klein, the Sports Ethicist and Philosophy Professor at Rockford College. The Sports Ethicist Show discusses the many ethical and philosophical issues that arise in and around sport. You can read the Sports Ethicist blog at sportsethicist.com, where you can also download podcasts of previous shows, subscribe to the podcast, or find links to related information. The Sports Ethicist is also on Facebook and Twitter, so you can like us or follow us. As many people know, on Monday, April 15th, which is Patriots Day in New England, two young men engaged in a terrorist act and set off two bombs at the Boston Marathon. Now, that issue in itself is not a sports ethics issue. But it raises some interesting issues for sports ethics that I want to talk about today. And then there was some also just stuff around the event that I wanted to talk about and get reactions to. And I could think of no better person to talk to in this than one of my oldest and closest friends, my best friend, Joe Danker. So we're going to give him a call here and see if he can talk to us and get his response. He still lives in Boston, and so he'll have a different perspective, I think, than those of us who are not in Boston through this experience. So we're going to give him a call and see what kind of conversation we can have.
Hello,
Joe.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing? You're on the podcast.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
All right. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
I think so. Okay, now that we're done with the Verizon commercial. So I'm glad to see the phone connection's working. I've never done that.
Excellent.
So, the topic that we talked about to talk about today is the Boston Marathon bombing. And, given that we're both from Boston and that you're still there, and just wanted to first start off with our reactions, like the reactions of the day. Like how did you first hear about it? I know you were at work, I think. So why don't you tell that?
Yeah, I was at work, as I'm sure many hundreds of thousands, millions of people were at work when they heard about it, and I was sitting in my training room, and my trainer just happened to look at her iPod and mention sort of offhand that, there's been something about some explosions at the Boston Marathon. And my first reaction, and I actually said to her, well, that's not good, which sounds like a very muted reaction, but at that time, I didn't know what that meant. We didn't know it was a bombing. We didn't know that there were casualties. We knew nothing. All we knew was the tweet or the brief, news line that said bombings at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. So at that point, you're certainly curious. I was certainly curious. I was certainly somewhat shocked, but not, shocked to the point of, oh my God, this tragedy occurred. So because you don't really know, I didn't really know, no one really knew exactly at that point, other than participants and people who were there at the event, exactly what was going on. So, well,
even they probably didn't know what was going on. I mean, they probably had similar reactions like, oh crap, something bad just happened. Now, whether it was an accident or intentional, I don't think anyone knew right away, except for maybe the people that were, right there and realized,
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what my reaction and our reaction there in the training room was. Something bad happened, but we don't exactly know what it was. So that was the initial reaction.
Right.
And from there, I mean, certainly emotions. Once more news started to come in, details started to come in over the next 2, 3, 4 hours, the reaction certainly changed dramatically and emotionally, and everything sort of started to formulate, and things were much different a few hours after that.
Yeah, I mean, I was having lunch and just got similar to your boss, your trainer. On my phone, just a little Sports Center notification comes through that there's been an explosion at at the marathon, so I didn't even use the term bomb yet. And so,
right, same with me. Explosions. You don't know exactly what it was. Yeah.
Right. And so my first thought was, oh, man, I hope that's just like, first, obviously, you hope no one was hurt or no one was seriously hurt. And,
right.
And because at first we didn't know. And then, so my first thought was, oh, maybe, there's so much electricity down there for all the news stations and radio stations covering the marathon and all the lights and stuff. Because, I mean, we've both been down there during the marathon. I mean, there's people coming in for hours after it's over into the nighttime. I mean, some people take 6, 7, 8 hours to finish the marathon. It's just like a personal thing. Obviously, they're not competing for any kind of championship except for their own pride of finishing it. And so people are coming in after dark, and so they have big lights set up. So I was like, oh, maybe. My first thought was maybe it was some sort of transformer or some sort of electrical accident like that, because it just said explosion. But then, not even an hour. I mean, after 15, 20 minutes, and they're still just talking, well, there's some explosion down there. And you're like, well, if this was a transformer, or if this was something electrical, something that was brought down there as part of the marathon or just part of the infrastructure there, we would have known already that it was an accident. So, that's when you started to kind of set in that, crap, this isn't an accident. Someone did this. And then you start worrying about who could do this and why. You start, I don't know if we'll ever really know why.
Know the why, yeah.
I mean, we have different theories, and they're talking to the guy, but... So...
Well, yeah, at that point, you're right. You said it. You don't really know, obviously, you don't know the magnitude of what occurred. And your reality at that point isn't really thinking about a terrorist bombing. You're thinking of all the things that could be, like you said, a transformer explosion. I thought possibly a manhole explosion or something like that, something electrical even. That's more of the day-to-day reality of what I would think could happen at that point. Well, a week and a day past that now, how wrong was I? We've come to see what a tragedy it turned out to be.
Right. Yeah, and just an awful tragedy. Just really shakes our foundation in a lot of ways. I mean, it reminded me a lot in different way, and a lot of people are drawing the comparison, of course, to 9/11, because for a number of reasons. I mean, one thing I remember. That Tuesday morning I was in the office, just came into the office, a place I worked in Poughkeepsie, New York. And, one of the guys, Tim, says, a plane just crashed into the World Trade Center. And you're like, what? Wow.
That's not part of my reality. I don't understand. What are you talking about? Yeah.
And you're like, wow, that's crazy. I can't believe a plane would get that, could do that.
An accident.
Right. You're just thinking an accident. It's not even part of your frame of reference. I mean, nowadays it's more part of our frame of reference that it's like, oh, is this an accident or did someone do this on purpose? We think like that now. But, in 2001.
Back then, no, you're thinking, someone flying a private plane crashed into a building. Geez, what the heck?
And then the next one crashed in and you're like.
And then something's up. Yeah.
You're like, shit, this isn't, that's just the coincidence is not. That's just not happening, and then all hell broke loose after that. And that touched everybody in a way that as awful as the marathon bombing is, particularly as someone from Boston, 9/11 was different. I mean, it was a game changer. Plus, I mean, just the order of magnitude of the tragedy with the thousands of people killed, and to see these buildings come down was just different than a couple of basically Chechen hoodlums, building their own bomb. I mean, it's a little different. I mean, although a life lost is a life lost, and I think it's such a especially as a parent, and I know you're an uncle for that little kid who this 8-year-old kid is a huge Bruins fan, and just seems like such a sweet kid. Just breaks your heart. I mean, and you just can't look at that in any other kind of way except just utter anger and tragedy.
Well, yeah, you and I were texting a few hours after the bombing, and certain events some facts were starting to come out. And when I got out of work, I was itching to get out of work. As things were starting to come in. I think it happened around 2:50 in the afternoon. I got to work around 4:30. As soon as I got in my car and got on the road, I started to catch up with what was going on, and that's when I found out that people had died.
Right.
And that was the first part, the first turning point for me, where everything changed emotionally for me. That's when I got very, very upset when I found out that people had died. That changed the game for me at that point. That brought it to a different level. And soon after that, I found out, I think it might have been you, whatever it was, I found out soon after that an 8-year-old boy had died. And I think I texted you, Sean, that not only makes me angry, but I'm very sad now. And that's when things started to sink in about the magnitude of the tragedy. And that was probably around, maybe 5, 6, 7 o'clock Monday night. And that's when things started to really started to change, and the understanding and grasping of what happened on my end really started to occur.
Now, how was, going back to your work day, I mean, you only had an hour or so, 2 hours after the events started to unfold to work. How was it working? I mean, were people able to work? Were you guys focusing, or were people just basically crowded around the computers looking for updates?
No, people were not. No one at that point really knew what had happened or understood the magnitude of. We didn't know a terrorist bombing and people had died. No one in my training room or at the workplace really understood what was going on. Some customers had come in. Some of the employees at the store itself were picking up dribs and drabs, but all we knew was that there was explosions at the marathon at that point. So, to speak for me personally, I was trying to get my work day done, to go find out what the heck had happened, to get out of work, get in my car, get on my phone, and find out what happened. Other people, from what I noticed, we were just going about our business, getting the work day done, and then let's go find out. So it wasn't one of those scenes where everybody was dialing into, trying to check their Twitter feed or hopping on Google or trying to get the latest news update. It was more of something happened, let's just get done with work and find out. Because we didn't understand at that point, we didn't know really what had happened. Let's say if this event had happened, let's say at 11 a.m. or noon, and more facts had been revealed throughout the afternoon, we knew about the deaths. We knew that it was actually bombings that had occurred. I think it would have been a different situation there later in the afternoon at the workplace. People probably would have left work. People probably would have been more attuned or trying to be more attuned to news feeds and what was going on. But it happened late in the afternoon, and just get the work done and then find out what happened. So
right.
that was kind of the scene. It wasn't one of those holy crap moments. Something major just happened. We got to drop everything we're doing and find out. It's more one of those, something happened, let's get done with this, and then we'll find out.
Right, yeah. I was doing my normal afternoon thing on Mondays, which is after lunch I go over to Starbucks and do some work there for my classes and things like that. And but I couldn't get anything done. I mean, I was just sitting there on the computer, reloading web pages, checking the Twitter feed, like you're saying, just trying to get information as it came out. And there's a lot of bad information coming out. And, emotionally I was shot. I didn't break down or anything. I was just like, oh my God. And just like, I couldn't think about anything else. And to try to sit down and try to do some work was just, I just couldn't focus. I got a little done here, a little there, as there was sort of a lull in the news cycle. And all you had was the information that was coming out was just, people's irrational and irresponsible speculation about things when, on the basis of no evidence one way or the other, and people just run out their mouth. So I was able to kind of pull away at that point. But then, as information started coming about some of the victims, it definitely pulled me back in, and it was hard to pay attention at all.
Once I found out about the deaths, it changed everything for me. And if you recall, at that point, we didn't know. We were hearing reports about other explosions. Maybe there was a controlled explosion somewhere in downtown Boston in the Back Bay, whether the authorities set that off or not. They found other bombs. And then there was the report about an explosion at the JFK Library, which turned out to be unrelated.
Just a fire.
I forget exactly what it was. But at that point, speaking for myself, that's when some fear actually did start to creep in.
Sure.
Because you've got you think you've got secondary explosions, so you don't know what's going to happen next or where the next thing is going to happen. You don't know if they've got bombs strung across the city. Your imagination tends to get the best of you, or it got the best of me in that situation.
Sure.
Fortunately, it turned out to not be the case, but that's a pretty common phenomena, I think, with these type of events, is that the rumor mill gets going and pseudo events start to happen, and there's a little bit of or a lot of fear spreading across, and I certainly felt that. I think I might have said to you, Sean, via text that this is getting scary because
right.
I didn't know what was next. So there was that element to it too.
Right. Yeah, I remember that text, and and all the just reports of this and that and the other thing. Devices and people calling. I mean, a lot of it was people just saw someone left a backpack somewhere, and so they suspicious device, and turns out it's just some kid's backpack.
Right.
But you're so heightened, and you're so. I mean, even here, at wherever Starbucks, something like that. Like someone I just look at a table and there's just a backpack there, and you start to your mind starts to race, and then you think, okay, well, this is a small little Starbucks in Rockford, Illinois. I don't think we need to worry about someone targeting it, but you never know. And so it is frightening, and that's the point to some degree from the terrorist point of view is just to try to create terror. I mean, that's why we call it terrorism, right?
Yep.
Well, I wanted to shift gears a little bit. A lot of people, I think, outside of New England don't understand what Patriots Day is, or the meaning of Marathon Monday. And so it's something. It's a day that I miss still. I still get. I don't pay attention to running sports all that much, but I always track the marathon. I remember for a while now they've been putting updates on the web, and you can track like the leader pack and see the different checkpoints along the way, and so I mean even when I lived in Arizona I used to check it all the time, and so even being out of Boston is still kind of a special day. The Boston Marathon. I don't check on other marathons. I don't keep track of the New York Marathon or anything like that.
No, me neither. Yeah.
And so maybe as and you and I, we visited the marathon several times, in different parts. Used to have a job that used to work down there sometimes, but then
other
times
used to help out a lot, helping out lifting cartons of fruit salad and all that.
Yeah. There's a little private joke in there, but so maybe you could say a little bit about what sort of Marathon Monday and Patriots Day means to you.
Well, Patriots Day to me, I don't know, frankly, I'm somewhat ignorant of what Patriots Day means, the actual holiday itself. But for Boston itself and for me, it's a beautiful, special day. And I think the bombings contrasting with that beautiful, special day added to the severity of the situation. It's a day, of course, the Boston Marathon gets run, and it runs into the city of Boston. There's always a Red Sox home game at 11 o'clock. I think it starts at 11 o'clock or 11:05 that
Red Sox
Monday
game?
morning to accommodate the marathon.
Yeah, the Red Sox games. Yeah, it's always at like 11. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the only game all season that starts at that time, and it might be the only game of any Major League Baseball team that starts at that point, at that time, all season in the day.
I think so. I think it's the only. I mean, obviously, back in the day, there were a lot more of those kind of games, but to my knowledge, it's the only one that's that early on the schedule in the day. I think there used to be, like the Twins used to have some early games because they would share their stadium with some of the college team as well as the football team, but now they all have their own stadium. So I think right now it's the only game that is that early, but certainly one of the few, if any.
Yeah, and that makes it that adds to the uniqueness of the day, the early Red Sox game. When it's a beautiful sunny day like it was on Monday, that just adds to the element. You've got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in town for the Red Sox game, particularly for the marathon. People from all across the world in town for the marathon. It's a wonderful celebratory day. For those of you who don't know the route of the marathon, it comes right through Kenmore Square, where the Red Sox play. So there's an intertwining of baseball and marathon at that point, the crowds, the sports. It's sort of I don't know if synergy is the right word, but it's a wonderful sporting day right there in Boston. And the backdrop of the Back Bay, one of the most beautiful urban neighborhoods in the world, it's a magical moment there, and you've spent time at the finish line. I used to work right along the marathon route, so I would take a half day and follow the marathon down to the finish line and go to some of the bars and enjoy myself and watch the marathon and cheer on the runners and make a day of it, you know. And sometimes we went to the Red Sox game a couple of years in a row. Yeah, we went to the Red Sox game. You'd get out, and right around there, it's a celebration. You know, people getting out of the Red Sox game if they won. They're cheering that. They're cheering on the marathoners. They're slapping the backs of the marathoners whom they know have finished the race already. They've got the metallic towels draped around their shoulders. Right. It's just a really wonderful day in the city of Boston. And
well, and really the whole area, right? I mean, because you know, you and I, we always say we're from Boston, but I mean, we're not. We're from the suburbs, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, you lived in Southie for a while, so you qualify really as like a true Bostonian.
Cred than you.
Yeah, definitely. But it'll be interesting to listen to the podcast later to see how my Boston accent comes out by the end of the show.
Yeah, I bet it'll be a little bit stronger.
Right. But right, so I mean, the marathon starts out in Hopkinton. And it goes through all these towns that you and I, you know, grew up in, Framingham and, you know, neighboring towns where we would play sports teams and, you know, drive through and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm sure like you, like me, you know, you remember as a kid going down to 135 and by was it Long Pontiac or whatever, and there used to be a I don't know if they still do this, but there used to be a band that used to play on top of Long Pontiac, and it's probably not called Long Pontiac anymore, but
it's not. I don't think the band is there anymore, but yeah, the point is valid. Yeah,
right. And it's probably like a Brazilian restaurant now,
right?
But it you know, they had they used to have a band up there, and one of my favorite things was always just bringing down all the oranges and stuff that you would hand.
The orange slices.
Yeah, and and that was like the biggest thrill for like I was like 10 or I don't know, you know, just to see like to have these like, you know, oranges and give them to people, and it's like you know, you got to watch out not to get run over.
I loved it. Yeah.
So it had, and you know, that's something else. I mean, I don't know how unique that is. From what I've heard, that's fairly unique. I mean, other marathons are much more, I think, professional events, you know, race courses. I don't know how close the spectators are to the course, if there's special viewing areas. I'm sure there's people around. I don't know how much sort of community support there is when you get to those other marathons. But I mean, all along the way from Hopkinton all the way into Boston through Newton and Framingham and all those places, Wellesley and so on. There's just people all along the course handing out water, handing out oranges, handing out Gatorade, I guess now probably. And
the fans, the audience, they're intimately connected. They're right there with the runners. They're touching hands with the runners, giving them orange slices, giving them water. There's that connection right there.
Right, and people with signs.
You've had it, you know?
Yeah, people with signs cheering on particular people, and just, you know, and then the runners always report of just how amazing it is that they see these signs, and you hear people always talking about how, you know, they get to Heartbreak Hill or something like that, and people cheering on people they don't know even, and don't, you know, they're just like, you know, people are starting to slow down. They're like, no, come on, you only got a little bit more, you know, you only get 5 more miles or whatever, you know, only 5 more miles. I don't know how anyone runs a marathon, but, you know, you know, that aspect of it makes the marathon so special. I mean, personally, to us, it makes it special because we've participated in it.
Right.
But I think, you know, to the runners and to in comparison to other spectator sports, I think it is pretty unique. I mean, there are other, you know, basketball, you're pretty close to the court. You know, I'm sure there's other marathons and stuff where spectators are pretty close. But I think that, combined with the tradition, the fact that they've been running this thing for over 100 years,
right.
the fact that they run it on a day that commemorates the starting of the revolution,
right.
to fill in your historical gap there, right? I mean, it's the start of the battles of it commemorates the start of the Battle of Lexington and Concord in 1775. And I did look that up to get the precise date, but right. And so
I'll go with it for now. You're
and so that as well, so it has this historical connection. The marathon doesn't follow the route. That would be pretty cool if it did, but, so it has that connection and the connection, the historical connection. And then, I mean, that's just, Boston has so much of that history going back to the Revolution and further on. And so all those connections just make it such a special day, which makes the attack, the bombing on this day, I think resonate in some other, in a deeper way. I mean, it's the real tragedy, as you and I have talked about this on the phone several times. I mean, the real tragedy, of course, is the loss of life. I mean, the fact that there's 3 people who died, people who lost their limbs, brothers and sisters who lost brothers and sisters and daughters and sons and so on. I mean, that's the real tragedy. That's
the people and the families who've been affected and will be affected the rest of their lives by what happened.
Right.
Yeah, that's the real tragedy, and we can't ever forget that.
No. But secondary to that, though, is this special day, this day that all Bostonians, or, all New Englanders really, although I think it's only officially in Massachusetts and Maine, but all New Englanders really, Bostonian people in the Boston area, this day is so special. I mean, people, Bostonians are all over the place, out in Arizona, out in California, out in Illinois, and so on. And, we all connect over our roots, but also particularly because of, when it comes to this day, I mean, it's something that we always know. You always know when the marathon is. Yep. And, I bet a lot of New Yorkers that aren't interested in marathons probably don't know. I don't know when. I think it's in November. I'm not really even sure when the marathon is.
Either, yeah.
But you always know that, the marathon is run, on the right around April 19th, whatever the closest Monday to April 19th. And
that's right.
Or the third Monday, I guess.
The third Monday in April, that's right. Yeah. And that's Patriots Day.
Right. That's always Patriots Day. It used to only be the 19th, but then it's moved around. Right. But they didn't want it moving around, so it's now the third Monday. And anyone who's grown up in that area knows that, and connects to that. Right. And so now that this is always going to have that as part of it. That's always going to be part of Patriots Day, memorials, honoring, which is important and should be done. But now it's always there. It's always part of that day, which used to just be pure delight. It was just, runners. And it almost, there were days, I'm sure, that it rained and that was cold. But it's always in my mind. It's always a nice day,
I see it that way too. You're right. A couple of years ago, it was a rainy, cold, miserable day, but I don't remember it that way. When I think of Patriots Day, I think of Marathon Day. I think of a bright, sunny day. I think of watching the runners come to the finish line. I think of going to the local bars. I think of going to the Red Sox game. I think of it being a wonderful day. Nothing negative about it. And now that's gone.
Yeah.
It's the part of nothing negative about that day is no longer the case. I censure a guest to think that for the rest of the history of the Boston Marathon, this event will always be part of it in some way or another, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, certainly for our lifetimes, it will be there. I mean, it's hard to, in a way we're talking
100 years down the road. But
right, because we're talking about an event that does commemorate a military battle. So there were people died, but we still sell it. So it's not completely free of that.
True,
but that I don't want to make those comparisons at all. But I mean, and that is obviously, like we said, that's the secondary tragedy. The real tragedy is the loss of life. But for those of us who don't know anybody who was directly involved or harmed, we don't have that as that just direct connection, but we do as people from Boston, and once you're from Boston, you're always from Boston. That
Yep.
you have that connection now, and that's always going to be part of our way of thinking about this day
Yep.
and this running and the marathon and stuff. I mean, that there's an extra tragedy there, a little bit of more sadness because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, if we could, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the emotional arc of the week,
Yeah.
culminating in Friday and soon after that?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, once I can speak probably for millions in the metro area or nationwide, once we got a grip of what happened and then the severity and the tragedy and some of the pictures of people losing limbs and the death of the 8-year-old boy and the two other deaths, once that all was realized, the sadness and the anger starts to set in, and then quickly being a Bostonian, you want to get revenge. You want to find out who did this and who's responsible for killing these innocent people. So you go through. I personally went to work Tuesday, Wednesday, and speaking for myself, I'm on the work treadmill at that point. Nothing's necessarily really emotionally set in for me. It's more of a wow, I can't believe that happened. This is unbelievable. Still processing the tragedies and still finding out, well, at that point, how many, 3 people have passed away at that point. Are there going to be more? How many people are injured? What's the severity of their injuries? You're still gathering information. It's still sort of a, I don't know what the right word to describe it is, but you're still information gathering and you're still on the treadmill. And for me personally, things hadn't really sunk in at that point because it's still a developing situation. Up until, was it Wednesday or was it early Thursday, maybe overnight Wednesday, when the surveillance pictures started to come out and they started to pinpoint.
Yes, I think it was Wednesday or
whom it could
Thursday.
have been. Wednesday, was it?
It was Wednesday or Thursday. I can't quite remember when. I
know for sure on Thursday.
Thursday was the official release, yeah.
The official release of those pictures of those 2 guys. These are the guys we're looking for. And when that happened, things changed. We speaking for Bostonians, we had our targets. We had the culprits. These are the guys we're after. And that you're on the, we got to go get them. So I'm still kind of riding high on the momentum of this roller coaster. Okay, we got the guys, we pinpointed the guys, now we got to go get them. And then to wake up Friday morning, last Friday, Sean, was one of the wildest days of my life. I'll tell you. From waking up at 6 a.m. Friday morning to seeing the reports of what happened overnight about the firefights in Watertown, the shooting of the police officer.
At MIT.
And I still can't get over that one. That one really gets to me, by the way. But the shooting of the police officer, the MIT police officer, to the firefights in Watertown, things happening. Every 15 minutes,
Joe,
news breaking about that.
What do you want to say a little bit about why that the shooting of the MIT cop sort of touches you in a way that maybe some others don't?
Yes, it was different. They targeted him, and I don't want to sound callous by any stretch here, but when they put the backpacks down with the bombs in them, there's a random element. Innocent people died. There's no exception there. There's no difference there. They didn't target anybody specific at the marathon. They were hoping to kill people. They were probably hoping to kill dozens or hundreds of people. I don't know what was in their head. I frankly don't care. But those were random. That was a random bombing. Okay.
Yeah.
When they went up to that MIT police officer who apparently was responding to a call of a disturbance, and from what I understand, the older brother Tamerlan said, "I'm the Boston Marathon bomber," and shot him in the back of the head. That bothers me because they targeted him. They targeted an innocent person doing his job, and for some reason that it bothers me. It doesn't bother me more. Yeah, it does bother me more, Sean. Actually, it does bother me more that they just killed him in cold blood rather than a random bombing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you can help me suss that out, but it seems to bother me more. It really gets to me.
Well, I think that as you're saying, sort of the intentionality of it there, focusing on him, sort of announcing himself and shooting an execution style. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I don't know if I have the same sort of emotional response, but I definitely can see why that might kind of stick out a little bit more as as something that just shows their cold. I mean, because you don't want to say like it's one thing to just place a bomb and kill random people. It's another thing to shoot someone in the head. But to some degree, there is. I mean, to put a gun to somebody's head and pull a trigger, something I can't even fathom doing. Not that I can fathom doing any of this, but it seems, I mean, you have to be that much more cold-hearted than to walk away from something that you know is going to explode, even though the results might be the same. Right. Your involvement, and so emotionally, it feels a little bit different, even if we look at the results as the same. Right. That's interesting. Yeah. So, the lockdown, and now I know you weren't affected by the lockdown per se, right?
Not particularly, no.
Yeah. Do you know anyone who was? I mean, we used to live over there.
No close friends. No. Oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, my friend Dave was. In fact, just to backtrack a little bit, on Monday evening, when we were starting to get the facts about it, it was one of these events, Sean, where you go, holy crap! All my friends and loved ones safe. Right. Those events. Those don't happen very often. In fact, the last time it had happened to me was 9/11, and this was one of those events. I have a friend who works right there in Copley Square, and one of my first thoughts was, "Oh my God, is Dave okay?" Because I know on Marathon Day, his office lets out early, and he's allowed to go down to the finish line and watch, and he has in the past. Right. I called him, and fortunately he chose the day to actually not go down. He took the day off. So what a fortuitous decision. Who knows what could have happened to him. But it was one of those events where you check on your loved ones, and those kind of events are so rare and they're so impactful to me that I'll never forget that aspect to it. But back to the shutdown. Dave, my friend Dave, was affected by the shutdown. He lives in Somerville, so he had no access to mass transit. But I wanted to talk about that as well. I don't know if you wanted to get on the subject of there's some criticism out there, Sean, about the shutdown. Yeah. Did you want to get into that?
Yeah, I mean, I have my thoughts on that, although they're kind of amorphous. I haven't. Partly it's not knowing enough of the details, but particularly as someone who knows people that were affected by it and is living there and hearing other people talk about it. I mean, I'm very curious to know, now that the sort of the adrenaline, I dare say excitement has worn off. The adrenaline of having caught these guys and so on. And, how people are viewing it. Is there a shift sort of towards, more negativity about the lockdown and so on?
No, not for the most part, no. Everybody whom I know was okay with it. They realized that this, first of all, it was done willingly. Nobody said the martial law was not declared. Nobody said, don't go out on the streets or you will be arrested. There was nothing like that. It was strongly suggested by the authorities to stay indoors. They shut the T down. There were no taxis. They shut the city down. Stay indoors for your own safety. And for the most part, from what I'm gathering from my acquaintances and my friends in the area, they supported that because that allowed the police and the authorities free tactical reign to do what they needed to do to catch these guys.
Do we have any reports of anybody being? Do we have any reports of anyone being arrested or accosted or anything?
Not that I've heard of. No.
Okay.
Nothing. So I think people probably were a little frustrated by it and cooped up and all that, but overall, everything I've heard, except for some talking heads out there in the media, were no. Let them, hey, it kind of stinks being cooped up, but by all means, go get them. Yeah. Shut it down. Go get the guys.
Well, there was one of the bigger issues. I think that the lockdown, like you said, because it wasn't a sort of order, from Menino saying no one leave their house. It was more of a suggestion, and people can take that one way or the other. But I think the searches, the house-to-house searches that were going on, and again, now I think there's a lot of fog there. A lot of different anecdotal reports, one way or the other, that it's hard to know what really went down. But there's some reports out there of people being at gunpoint, evacuated from their homes, and then having their homes searched for the suspects, sometimes with damage done in the home, and then and then the police moving on, and all of this without presumably a warrant, because and that raises real civil liberties concerns about illegal searches. And I hope that there will be some oversight investigation by the city or by the state, or by the feds in some way, or even a third party organization to see, someone to go out and collect to see, just was this more of an aberration, or what was going on by the police in these situations to make sure that people's civil liberties were protected, because as important as it was to catch these guys, we still have to respect people's rights, and make sure that those are protected, as best as they can. I mean, it's one thing if there's probable cause, or did they just see the guy run into someone's house? Well, that's a different situation than just, we know he's in Watertown somewhere. Let's just start on this street and just make everybody leave their homes. That's a totally different situation.
There should be there should be an investigation into that. Yeah, I agree.
Has there been any talk of anything like that?
Not that I've heard. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to those are interesting things, but I did want to still try to keep this as the Sports Ethicist show tied to sports somewhat. Yeah. And we're sports fans, right?
We are.
And the Red Sox game's going on right now, by the way. We see a lot of pictures, outside of Boston, Sports Center and whatnot, ESPN Radio and so on, about the games that went on that week, the Bruins game particularly, the Red Sox games, and so on. What are you hearing? What are you feeling in terms of the reaction to these games? What role they're playing in healing people and moving on?
A big role, without a doubt. The two games that come to mind are the Bruins against the Sabres. I think it might have been Thursday, or what night was it? I think it was Thursday night, maybe Wednesday night.
I think it was Wednesday.
Either Wednesday, when the national anthem was sung by the crowd. An absolutely beautiful, moving, emotional event, and the two teams after the game coming together to bang sticks,
raising their sticks
in a
to
show
the crowd.
of support. That game right there was really important, I think, for the city to get back on track with respect to normal life in some way, start playing sports games again, start getting the sporting events going again. But that right there, just the national anthem, that's going to go down as one of the great moments of Boston unity and support during this crisis. That was one big thing. The Red Sox game was it Saturday?
Yeah.
The Red Sox game on Saturday, and that moving tribute with Neil Diamond singing Sweet Caroline before the eighth inning, with Big Papi's speech before the game, with the whole memorial tribute pregame, again, huge. And the Red Sox, above any other certainly above any other sporting institution, perhaps above any other institution in Boston, is the one thing that binds everybody. And for that memorial to take place in Boston at Fenway Park, a stone's throw from where the bombings occurred, meant more to the city than any other sporting event it could at that time. So that right there was a huge healing moment for the city, and enough can't be said about Big Papi saying what he said. And I want to mention that I think that when he came out and he dropped that F-bomb, as much as I love Big Papi and wanted to give him a big hug after that, because I think he spoke for all of us when he said, "This is our effing city." Not only did what he said was important, but his spirit of defiance there, Sean. He was dropping an F-bomb on national TV, and the FCC even came out and said, "We're okay with that." Why I think Bostonians and Red Sox Nation and everybody kind of rallied around and was so supportive and so excited by Big Papi saying what he said by dropping that F-bomb was that spirit of defiance. And I think it sort of symbolized and spoke for the defiance that Bostonians feel towards this terrorist act. Yeah. You know, Boston's we're some of the toughest SOBs around, Bostonians, and doing some terrorist random bombing at one of our wonderful events. When they say you mess with the wrong city, that doesn't mean it doesn't mean we're going to come after you. It doesn't mean we're going to kick your ass or anything like that. What it means is you're not going to scare us. You're not going to put any fear into us. We're a defiant city. We're a stubborn city. And when Big Papi came out and said that this is our effing city, it was in that spirit of defiance. And I think that's why that resonated so strongly with all of us. Yeah. So
I'm gonna play it right now. I thought
that was an important thing for him to come out and do. And
I'm gonna play it right now.
This is our fucking city. And nobody gonna dictate us with it. Stand strong. Thank you.
I mean, when I saw that, it moved me tremendously. It was an icebreaker. That's part of it. Yep. It kind of just broke the tension. Not an icebreaker, but a tension breaker. It just, you have this moving ceremony, people giving speeches. It's very, people just tense. People move. People in a more sanguine frame of mind. And then for him to come out there and just say in 3 sentences everything about what it means. This means to Boston. Yep. And to just encapsulate it so succinctly like that, and to express it that way with that kind of emotion. I mean, you could hear the crowd. The crowd. I mean, they're just kind of cheering, and then he lays that out there, and the crowd just goes crazy. You know, and I mean, I found it interesting
for all of us at that point, and that was beautiful.
Yeah, and I listening to WEI, the day after that, or I guess on Monday on Salk and Hawley, they were talking about that, and there were people calling up and critical of it in the sense of, well, he doesn't need to swear, and it's not appropriate to cuss, and
well, come on.
I mean, partly, I'm not. As you know, I'm not the cleanest of mouths in that respect.
No, you're not.
I try to watch myself, but
doesn't always work. Yeah.
No, and I also, I mean, part of it is a laziness, but part of it is I hold the philosophic position about that there are no bad words. There are inappropriate times to use certain words, and the things that we call swear words and so on like that. I think there are many contexts where it's inappropriate and would be wrong to use those words. The words themselves are just words,
right?
And so it's sort of like taking a script from Harry Potter, right? I mean, you name the thing for what it is, and you're not going to be afraid of it. And so I think there's nothing to be afraid of from certain words. It's what do you mean when you're using those words? What are you doing with that? And there, and I talked about this with my wife, and she understands the sentiment. She I think, doesn't know, she's like, oh, he didn't really need to use it. Why does he have to use it?
Really?
Yeah. And my view is he has to use it there. It's just not, this is our city is not the same as saying this is our fucking city. I mean, there's an emotional element that just, gets at you from the gut there that no other word captures. And, also, as you're saying, right, I mean, it captures Boston too,
Yeah.
And so it's appropriate in that context, but I think mostly it's appropriate just because it truly expresses, the emotion that Papi was feeling, the emotion that the city was feeling. Yeah. And the emotion that the nation was feeling, I think, was, that this is ours. And I think that word, the F-bomb there, was was the most apt adjective one could use to really characterize that, and so I totally support it.
Yeah. Hey, look, when you're using curse words, you use them for impact. Generally, right?
Right. I mean, you remember
when you use correctly, you use them for impact.
Right. I mean, so partly we both got this from the same source, right? Mr. James, right? Back in senior year English class, right?
Oh, that's right, Sean. Wow, nice.
Yeah.
Well done. You're right.
Right. I mean, he used to say that, if you're going to use the swear word, he used to say something along the lines of don't swear, because when you want to swear, you need to have those words. I mean, when it's every other word, when people just drop an F-bombs, like I don't know if you ever watched, almost any HBO show, but Deadwood, right? Every other, was a mother this, a mother that, Yeah, it loses, and I mean it's kind of frightening, when you watch that show, because after a couple episodes, you don't even hear it. Right. And so it totally loses its impact. And so because we don't hear it that much, and I think that's appropriate. I think in most contexts, it's not appropriate. But there are some, and I think this was one, and it has a tremendous impact precisely because of that. And I think it's,
you said it.
And I think it was, I totally support it. And I think it also meant a lot to a lot of people to just have that moment and to see, and then to have Big Papi do it. I mean, Papi represents the city in a way that not a lot of the athletes do. I mean, and he represents, also what's great about America. Someone from another country coming here, adopting his place. I mean, he doesn't say this is your city, this is our city. And I mean, he grew up in Dominican Republic. His English is still, mixed, and but he's been in Boston now for a long time, and been in the States for a long time, and he's adopted it, and it's his now, and that's what this country is about, and that's the freedom that's so important. That's the freedom that was, in part fought for on the original Patriots' Day in April 19th, 1775, and it's the freedom that we've been fighting for, ever since. Yep. What do you think the marathon's going to be like next year?
Well, that's a good question, huh? I wanted to mention something that I heard. I was listening to radio a few mornings ago, and the editor for Runner's World magazine was being interviewed, and he was talking about how this bombing is not going. He's a runner. He's a marathon runner. It's not going to deter him from running races or marathons in the future. In fact, far from it. And I feel the same way. Something like this would never deter me from doing what I love to do or what I want to do or anything like that. In fact, it would make me more stubborn to achieve and do things that I want to do. So he was, his point was that the terrorists are not going to influence me, and most other runners are not going to shy away from running marathons because of this. But the point that he brought up was, but what about my family? He says, my family, 2 kids, wife, are always there at the finish line whenever I run a race. He goes, I am going to think twice about the next marathon or race I run, about putting my family at the finish line like that. So I thought that was very thought-provoking, because that is changing our behaviors based upon a fear from this event. So how are marathons going to look in the future? I don't know. What's the next one? The London Marathon?
Yeah, I'm more. I mean, not that I'm not concerned about those other marathons, but
the Boston Marathon,
right? I mean, because obviously, trying to secure a marathon anywhere is impossible, right?
Impossible,
you can't secure 26 miles in this way and have spectators. I mean, you could close it down so there are no spectators, but that's maybe other marathons that could work, but I mean that you can't do that at the Boston Marathon. I mean, you can't close down the route so that no one is spectating except at certain given points that are under security. I mean,
I think that next year's Boston Marathon, they have to do something with respect to upping the security in some way, but I don't have the faintest idea of what they're going to do or how they're going to execute on whatever plan they have.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I don't know.
I mean, it's
a big topic of the fear, and terror, and what terrorists try to do, and that's change our behaviors. I really hope that the Boston Marathon going forward is not something that we don't recognize anymore because of the security, because that will represent to me some sort of, not a victory, but, You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, to some degree, we have to change our behavior. You can't just go and
to some degree we have to.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the notion that it's like, oh, well, just do what you've always done. Well, you can't.
Well, no, you can't. Yeah.
But so I'm not a security expert by any stretch. I imagine they'll obviously have a lot more feet on the ground, people milling around in the crowds, checking people out. I would bet that certain areas along the course, like the finish line, like the starting line, are going to be heavily secured, so that you probably aren't just going to be able to walk freely down there. They'll probably have checkpoints.
And they may bottleneck some of the egress and ingress and egress to the finish line itself.
Of course, that just creates new points of targets, right? Because now you have a bunch of people lined up. So I mean, I'm not sure there is a solution in that respect, in terms of and there can't be in the sense of protecting it 100%. You can't do that, right? And and this gets to other sort of issues about how to combat this sort of war. How do you fight this kind of war? Or just these kinds of criminal activities. How do you prevent them? And it does. My view is better intelligence and increasing the intelligence assets and finding that kind of stuff out so that you can prevent it from ever happening in the first place. I mean, there's reports about how the FBI, as well as the Russian security agencies, had this guy in their radar. I mean, I don't begrudge them for not doing anything about it. Like, oh, well, they knew. No, they didn't know. They investigated the guy, and he just seemed like a crackpot. I mean, there's a lot of people like that. They didn't, they don't have enough resources to keep an eye on everybody, nor do we want them to keep an eye on everybody.
And the fact that they were aware of him at some point in the recent past, I would think probably helped us get a beat on these guys as quickly as we did. So
yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think it does show some of the efficacy of the intelligence agencies, because I mean they did identify somebody who was a potential guy. I mean, they didn't. How many times does this happen where they are able to prevent something? I mean, I'm sure there's some of those that you never hear about. They prevent them, and they don't want to broadcast it because they don't want to scare people, and so someone just goes to jail for that. Yep. All right, well, we're probably getting close to running out of time here.
It's all over.
Almost, man. Yeah. No, this is fun. Well, we'll definitely have to have you on again.
Awesome.
To talk, more specific issues, at least even if it's just for a little bit. Did you have any other sort of closing comments about the marathon, or?
Nothing in particular. I mean, thank you for having me on, Sean. It was a pleasure to participate. And but as far as the event itself and what happened, it took me until about Sunday, 2 days ago, to finally sit down and process it and let my emotions and come to the fore about what I felt about it. And I, probably much like millions of other Bostonians in this area and worldwide, we're deeply, deeply affected by it. And it's a very, very sad, tragic event, and something we will never forget. And it's changed the landscape of Boston. Not the actual landscape, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Forever, and it's something we should never forget. And I hope we learn some good lessons from it. And I want to give a big kudos out to the police and the authorities who got the job done very quickly, and I'm sure mistakes were made, and that's okay. We got the guys, and very proud of everybody involved in that, and proud to be from Boston, a city that stood up, didn't back down, and got their man, and I'm very grateful for that. So,
Boston strong.
Boston strong.
All right, brother.
All right, Shawnee, thanks for having me on.
No problem. Talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye. In closing, I wanted to just inform listeners that if they are interested, they can donate to the One Fund Boston, which is a fund set up to help the people most affected by the tragic events in Boston on April 15th. You can donate at onefundboston.org. This has been the Sports Ethicist Show. Thank you for listening. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, as well as the blog sportsethicist.com. Join us next week when I hope to talk about the 40th anniversary of the designated hitter rule.